I'll call the meeting to order, 7:02. And why don't we do introductions? So Dick, do you want to go first?
Sure. Dick Burke, appointed member to the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
And Tabor?
Tabor Keeley, also appointed member to the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I guess Dick and Cheryl and I all were on the original plan working group that we had, and I think was like 2012. We started talking about it, and it wasn't. We didn't meet until much formalize it until later, but that was a very dense 18 months.
All right, and Regina, introduction.
Hi, Regina Campbell-Lone, member.
All right, and before we get to Megan, Cheyenne?
Cheyenne Frazier, I'm the Assistant Director of Planning.
And Megan is our new representative from the Select Board. So Megan, want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Megan Haggerty, newly elected Select Board member. Really excited to help the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Okay, great. So as we said, Elaine's going to be a little late. So we'll go ahead and get started. Our next meeting date. So we have been meeting on Mondays. Does that still work for folks?
Yeah.
That works for you, Megan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as we have July 4th weekend and the Monday after that, we should probably think about after that. So the 14th of July is a Monday. Does that work? Okay.
To me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how about August 4th or 18th? The 11th, I'm away.
I think August 4th would be better for me.
Okay.
I don't know about anyone else.
All right, August 4th.
And we're going to go into September because we're set to conclude it by October. So I'd like to make sure we get these on the calendar. So we could do, when's Labor Day weekend? Okay, this
Labor Day is
Day's
the first.
Okay, so we could do September 8th. And that leaves us a little time in case we need to have a
So selfishly, that's my daughter's birthday.
Okay.
So if we can avoid it, but
and the Select Board meets on Tuesday still, Megan?
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we could either try for Wednesday the 10th or Monday the 15th.
I'm fine with the 10th.
10th would be better for me.
10 sounds fine.
Okay, September 10th. And Cheyenne, would you kindly send out a hold on the calendar for those, please, so we can have those? Okay, great. Thanks. All right, meeting minutes. I sent those out. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Do I need to pull them up on the screen, or are we good?
Well, it was just the one set, right?
Yes, just the April 1st.
Seemed fine to me.
Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve the April 1st meeting minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second it. Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call. Tabor?
Yes.
Regina?
yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, next, moving right along. We don't have anyone here, so we won't have citizens speak. And discussion of the Milton shuttle bus service is next. I sent out a scope of work or that Deborah Milbauer provided. Just as a reminder, she has spoken to us as a representative from the Partnership for a Healthy Milton. And they have interest in their planning as transportation is a key public health issue. And she had seen that the shuttle transportation was a recommendation in the master plan, and that's why she initially came to us. There had been some discussion at our last meeting about whether the sort of exploratory scope that was defined in that letter could be done as a capstone project. She met with colleagues who run and teach the capstone program at Northeastern and learned that they didn't think it was a good fit because the student usually develops the program themselves and they don't normally have a program handed to them to follow up on. So she had planned to be here tonight, but because her daughter is nominated for a statewide award in the theater program, she's attending that. So we're sorry that she couldn't make it, but she does ask that we consider a stipend out of our budget that would be used to pay a Northeastern student who could do that scope of work. There has been some discussion where that might sort of land after the sunsetting of this committee. And there's some thoughts about whether that be another committee or a department like the planning department. But I think the idea would be that initially the scope and the funding would come from our committee if there's support for that. So I can call that scope up on the screen if anyone, let me just do that. Let's see. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. So I open it up for question and comment.
Cheryl, could you just go over one more time why this wouldn't fit into just the scope of services for credit for one of the students? I'm a little confused by that.
Well, the credit program is the capstone program, and
Yeah.
what was relayed to me by Deborah was that she met with her colleagues and those who teach and run the capstone program, and they didn't think it was a good fit because normally the student would develop the scope of work in the program that they were going to proceed with or get approval for. It normally wouldn't be something which is handed to them. So she felt that it was a much better fit for this to be an easier and faster and more reliable if it were a paid stipend and under her supervision. So that's sort of where she started, I think, when she first came to us, and we asked her to think about the capstone and look into it. And so
I think there was one other thing, Cheryl, and that was the timing of the capstone wouldn't allow it to start until the fall semester, and so it would put like a wait time before we could have anything come back too. So it was a little
correct. That's true.
Not working with the time.
Right. So that's the faster piece of it. I see. Megan, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
So I thought this was a pretty decent scope. So a couple questions. Do we have a precedent for a product in mind? Has this type of research been performed for another town? And secondly, just because if such a product has already been produced, sometimes it's nice to give that as an example. And then secondly, what was unclear to me was the qualifications or field of study for the student researcher. So, for example, we may not want somebody who is, I don't know, just not in the field of transportation or like we'd give more consideration to somebody in the field of transportation or public health versus I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, that's a great point, Megan.
I don't know.
Cheryl, do you mind if I
Please
take
do.
this?
Go ahead. I'm
So,
looking for one of the plans. Yeah.
Yep. When Deborah came to meet with us, she had an engineering professor with her, and between the two of them, they had sort of a public health and civil engineering sort of lens to consider this project for. Deborah's no longer working with that engineer for this project. She thinks that it's a better fit under her purview, but she still will have access to students of that ilk. So I think she had some ideas about where to get that from, being embedded in the university, and I think that we can certainly trust her judgment in that regard.
Can you see this guidebook?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I had shared with Deborah. It was prepared by the Boston Region MPO. That is a acronym for the Metropolitan Planning Organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was something where they looked at some things to think about, and they did have a few examples in here. So we thought that this could be a resource for them to look into, as well as the interviews that they would be doing. I think we also had shared several communities that operate these, Megan. I had reached out to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and asked them if they knew of other communities that were running shuttle programs. And I think they sent back about 6 or 8 that we had put on our list. And then we, in addition to this document, there were a few others that were shared via links, not necessarily hard. I don't have the copies up, able to bring them up on the screen here. I think the idea would be to find someone who had some interest in the transportation, but that it wasn't necessary because really it was going to be collecting data. Okay, Tabor, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so we did go through a couple of these other towns that had, like Acton has a new program. There's some others regionally that have some older programs, and then Dedham started a program and it failed. So it seems like there's a mix of programs that have been around for a little bit, and there's some experience. So we should be able to get some budgetary numbers and participation, et cetera. My biggest concern isn't the study, but is the fact that we're promoting this and we're looking at, October is our end date. And so unless we have a design to continue this study, because the study all by itself will only get us interested in it. It won't actually finish anything. Seems like we really need to know where the financing is going to come from for the next stage or next few stages until we ended up with a product that the town could actually use. And I think otherwise, it seems to me it would be $1,200 or $1,800 or whatever the amount is money wasted, not well spent. But I know that we talked about this before, but I don't know if anybody's thought about the next step.
So one thing, I have talked with Deborah about it. My feeling is that it could become part of a recommendation of an update to the master plan, is note that this work is ongoing, and that I was thinking the planning department, because the master plan was adopted by the planning board and the select board, that the planning department could be the one that receives, if you will, the report that the students have, and that would be sorry, I'm getting a message from Elaine. That would be handed off in addition to the recommendations for an update to the master plan. So it would be one of the next step follow-ups, Tabor, the way I see it, just like we're going to have follow-up recommendations on other items coming out of the our reports, the way.
Right, but a lot of what we've done so far is, been on somebody else's dime, although we have done certainly some other zoning studies and things but those have been finished. And this was just if we think it's going to cost, and I'm throwing a guess out, like $10,000, $8,000 to finish a full study on this thing, and we're only into it by 20%, then what kind of level of confidence do we have that this will
I see what you're asking.
go to the next step?
So I had been in conversation with Nick Milano leading up to the budget, and in the contingent budget, which was the override budget, he carried $30,000. It's targeted at the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And I had asked him to put that in so that there would be funding available for an update to the master plan. It wasn't in the non-contingent budget, but so it did make it because the override passed. So there's $30,000. And I had spoken to him about where that money goes when the committee sunsets. And that's something that I didn't get a final answer, I don't think, but I do think the idea that it's available for continuation of the master plan, and we would need to find out from him if for no other reason that the committee needed to have a new committee, a new master plan update committee, or whether that would be this one. So I don't have a final answer on that.
Okay.
Cheryl, refresh my memory. What's the capstone project?
That's for credit. That would be like there was this discussion about students doing work with, rather than a stipend, that they're getting course credit.
Right.
So that's what, so the idea that it didn't seem possible that this could be done by a student for credit.
One more time, why not?
That's what Deborah was told by her colleagues who run the capstone program at Northeastern.
Okay, since it seems like we're sole sourcing this to Deborah, I'm just wondering, I think most of us have done projects in school, graduate school. I know I've done it a couple of different times at two different graduate schools. I never get paid to do it, and oftentimes someone came to us and said, we'd like to have some work done. I don't know, it's just something about it. I don't see the urgency, number one, but number two is the idea of, is it only this project that we're going to in terms of asking them to do the work, and then they say they can't do it for credit, so then we have to pay a stipend to the kids?
Well, there's a couple of questions in there. The idea, I think it was offered to us that the Partnership for Healthy Milton was interested in seeing whether this committee had done any follow-up work on the recommendation in the plan to develop or at least explore a shuttle system or intertown system. We heard from the Alex Hasher from the Climate Action Planning Committee that they are interested in this topic as well. In fact, they have recommendations in their draft climate action plan related to it. And then we had heard that there's interest in how students get back and forth to East Milton Square from the high school using school buses. So it's not just one person or one entity that's interested in this. There's multiple entities. It's something that hadn't in the last 10 years been looked at. It is something that I, for one, believe is an important recommendation that deserves follow-up.
I'm not debating that. I'm just, someone came to us with an idea. We talked about it, I think, at the last meeting. We thought that it may be something we could postpone until school started because we thought the students could get credit. And now we're going back to something we've already had conversations about the whole stipend. And I'm just wondering about if the capstone project will not agree to give credit to a student for performing this information, could we or should we look to other programs to see if they would?
Well, this is an opportunity that's presented to us. I don't think there's an opportunity, unless someone else wants to spearhead it. I don't think we have another volunteer
Right.
who's offered to spearhead it.
I think the other thing, Dick, is it's what, $1,200, and I think, you know, to be able to sort of wrap this into our master plan implementation report by our deadline, which I think might be possible if the student is working on this over the summer. I think that would be worth us giving it a try and trying to say, like, here are the steps that we took to try and address this line item in the master plan. Would you agree?
Well, I agree. There's a lot of things in the master plan, as you know, and this is a good idea, I think. I'm not debating that. What I'm asking is, should we, if it's important, should we look for other people to try to save a couple of dollars here, or is it if this can be guaranteed that this project will be finished by October, if we sunset it, is that something we should work into some sort of an agreement?
So just 1 sec, Dick. Cheyenne, you had your hand up, and I just wanted to see if you had something that you wanted to relay related to.
A
if you would-
while, kind of, possibly.
Okay.
I know a while back when we met with Deborah, there was a question of whether we could encumber the funds and then hold it until we find a student. And I had spoken to Amy Dexter, I think it was like a month or two ago, and she had said that we couldn't encumber the funds into either the next fiscal year or after the committee sunsets. So I think if we were going to have that money, then the student would have to start during the time that we have the funds. Just, I don't know if that helps or hurts, but a little bit of info.
Okay, so we have funds that for this fiscal year that ends the end of June, right?
Yes, end of June.
And then so this would need to come. Then it sounds like would come out of the next year's budget, that 30,000 that I was just speaking about.
Yeah, and then I didn't know if we were for sure going to get an intern or a student for the fall, or if this was going to be something that would be pushed into next spring through the planning department, just for like timeline and funding purposes.
Okay, I think, you know, if this were approved, then her goal would be to begin searching or advertising or seeking out someone. I think it's left here, and you can see in the time frame that she provided. I think if she found that before we sunset she didn't have someone and it would be a beginning of spring, then we could have another conversation, I think, about that. Megan?
So just a couple things I'm hearing that I think are good points. Sort of understanding the broader context, or roadmap for this project, sort of like the key hurdles that this has to get through overall. So the document that you showed from the Boston MPO, so I'm wondering if there is a way that the final report for the student could also reference the key steps that need to be taken. Can it also shed light on a roadmap that at the end, when the student or whomever is conducting this work hands an analysis back, but also it seems like there's a bit of work that still has to happen to understand what is the pathway that this project has to take in order to be a reality. And then just to also cover Mr. Burke's point about the sole source, I do think we should double, triple check that this doesn't run into any procurement challenges if we haven't done so already. I do think that if we can I think that this is probably the most cost-effective way for us to get this work done, if it's possible. I think anyone from a private firm would probably charge us a lot more. And also too, I guess my question is did we check with the MPO to see if they had anyone who could help us with this work? I don't think the Boston MPO does this
No.
for municipalities, right?
No, the only people that would do it would be like MAPC, who
Right.
get a lot of their funding and also deliver the funding for the MPO. But
Right.
No, and I checked with them, MAPC, about doing this. They didn't offer much except for the communities that they provided the names for. They did do some internal discussion or checking about it. I think one of the thoughts would be that if students could get an interview with the Boston MPO, that would be helpful. There's one other document, so let me stop this share 1 sec. There's a person in the health department that Deborah had mentioned. Her name is Lisa Courtney. And she also mentioned a Mass in Motion grant. It looks like I think Lisa also provided me with this particular document. And looks like MAPC was involved in this document to some extent. And she had mentioned this was pre-COVID. So I think the idea was like somebody who can go through these documents, find out what's been done, make some phone calls, and sort of put a recommendation of what next steps would be, was the idea. Because it's a lot for one of us to go through. I haven't had time to go through these documents and these other communities in any level of detail, but it would be great to get from someone, here's what's been done, here's some of the ways it's been done, here's some of the things that you would need to think about, here's what kind of money you would need. And that might be as far as it goes, Tabor, right? Because it could be that, that there's not going to be any kind of funding available. Or maybe it goes next to the partnership for, if they're thinking about a Healthy Milton, does like bid bus, does the hospital participate in some fashion, right? So who could be partners? I think that's what the way other communities have done it, is they found partners. It's not purely taxpayer funded. So that's what we would need to find out, like what have other communities done? And that was the idea as a first step, is to do some due diligence. I mean, if this committee were like just starting, like we had in the beginning, where we did some due diligence in other locations, we did Milton Landing, and we spent a fair amount of time, digging into the details there. We don't have that luxury any longer, but this would be a good first step. All right. So we have, as far as the procurement, at 2,400, that doesn't have to have multiple bids or even multiple proposals sought. Cheyenne, is that correct? Oh, Cheyenne, you're on mute.
Oh, I asked if you could repeat the question, please.
As far as procurement on an
Yes.
amount of 2,400, are multiple proposals required, as far as you know?
Let me check, 'cause I know we had that question a while back, and I think it was for the 7 Brush Hill Road project when we first started it.
And We did not get multiple proposals for that, which was,
No.
what, $11,000
Mhm.
of this committee's funds. So I would think that this would fall under that requirement as well.
Well, I don't think the question, Cheryl, is whether or not we have to. I guess the question is, should we?
Yeah, I think if we don't make a decision on this, we will not be involved in this particular topic moving forward. I think it would be a missed opportunity myself, but the Partnership for Healthy Milton would need to take it to some other town committee or department or board for support and action. That's what I see happening.
Were you volunteering to look into that?
Oh, me?
Yeah, are you, is that why you want us to?
What I'm thinking about is to avoid any sort of criticism, just or unjust. Should we be talking to other people besides this
No,
one
I get
group?
that. No, I get that.
Well,
Is that something that you want to do?
Hmm?
Is
Well,
that
you want
something
me to
that you
do it? I
want?
could do that. Sure. I can
Sorry?
make some phone calls. I can
Yeah?
make some phone calls.
I think that would be lovely.
Is that okay? Okay, I'd be happy to do that. As long as we have that scope of service, is that correct?
Well, this is a scope of service that was developed for students. So I guess the question is, if you're talking about hiring a professional, then the question becomes, whether the same scope applies.
There are a number of graduate programs around that have kids looking for these types of projects to do. So I'm just wondering, should we go to other programs, ask them if this would be interesting to them, whether or not it would be allowed for credit, and if not, would they be interested in getting a stipend also?
So my thought is this, yeah. So my thought is that this, if that path is taken, it will be past this committee's tenure. So at that point, you just recommend to Deborah she speak to other committees and boards. In my view, I don't see this committee having the time to follow up with a new entities, and before we sunset, we have 3 meetings left. At this point, July, August, and September, and we need to wrap up the report. So I think it's either we ask them to take their request elsewhere, or we support it. That's where I believe we are. And so it's unfortunate we don't have Deborah to ask any further questions of, but I really do think that's given our time frame, that's where we are.
So it's Deborah's program or nothing. Is that what we're saying right now?
I think for our committee, I mean, I just don't. Do you see a way we can get this done, but in 3 months? As if we took the lead on it.
I have no idea. I thought that we were going to have this was going to be for credit, and would probably start sometime in the fall.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for probably at least 3 meetings, and our last meeting was the 1st of April, so probably since February. I think at this point it's
Is this one of those times where I can say we can shit or get off the pot?
That's kind of where I am with it.
I knew it.
It's
Well, it seems like a valid line of questioning, but it just seems that it be lost, the value in this, whatever we create, whatever this report comes out, it's going to be lost to the unknown, which is there another committee that follows this up? Is the master plan going to be revitalized, or is it going to be rewritten from scratch? I mean, all these other, and those are the big questions. And this is sort of a side note, and it seems I just think it's a distraction at this stage, and I'm not so sure that, even if the poor kid gets paid for it, whether it's of any value, because at that point it might be 3 years before this thing comes back around. I'm making that number up. I don't know.
You're a pessimist tonight, Tabor.
I see bigger fish to fry, and this is something that if we'd been jumping on this thing 2 years, 3 years ago, it would be in a whole different scenario. But right now, I just think it's unless we know where this is going to go, that we're just kind of wasting time to get some information that may or may not be valuable, 2, 3 years from now. I just think it could be very, very likely to be out of date.
But I'm not quite understanding the 2 or 3 years from now, Tabor.
Well, if we're done in October, then what happens to it? This information.
Well, that's what I think it gets passed on.
To
My
who or
thought would be
what?
the planning department, because the planning department would be, and the planning board would be who would take up the update to the master plan unless there's a new committee appointed. Remember, the master plan committee itself was appointed by, I think it was the planning board, right? In 2013, 14, but it had one planning board member, Emily Innes was the chair, and it had what, 10, 14 of us who were represented all different sorts of interests, I guess, not on any boards or committees.
Right.
So an update to it, which isn't as broad as that, could have people who are familiar with the plan itself, anybody from this committee, and then presumably would have new folks as well. But the whole idea about requesting the funding and not asking for a full new master plan was that it would move along. It wouldn't take 2 or 3 years to do. So I'm hoping we're going to advocate that the funds that were secured would be used in this coming fiscal year. So within this coming year, starting July 1st, to get the master plan updated. Remember, having that master plan updated also presumably will be back into standing to get grants, but there's grant funding that's available by having an adopted master plan. So, all right, so I think we need to probably wrap this part of the discussion up, this agenda item up. I'm not sure that we have consensus on it. Cheyenne, do you have any further thoughts on it?
No, I don't, but I have an answer to the prior question. I went to go
Okay.
find it, and it says for anything under 10,000, we just need to be following sound business practices. So kind of just making sure
Okay.
that the scope of work and the price are on the same page.
Okay. All right. So, Regina, Megan, any final thoughts on it?
Well, I guess one question that I have is the money that we have access to right now, that's primed for use toward the master plan. Is that going away as of October 1, or I'm sorry, June, is it June 30th?
So this current fiscal year funds
Yep.
would go back into free cash, if not expended by the end of June.
Okay.
Prior town accountants have allowed for funds to be encumbered and used going forward, but I think
Yep.
that's
Yep.
a policy change in the last year or two, maybe.
Okay.
So that, what that really means for any committee that has any budget, you really got to plan for finishing your work,
Right.
having your work
Right.
ready and finishing it before the end of the fiscal year. And lots
And
of
so-
planning work it carries out for
Right.
for longer than 1 year. I know this
Right.
is a discussion we've had on the planning board. And Cheyenne, has that been something that you've worked out with town accountant on how you can have a contract that goes beyond 1 year or beyond a fiscal year?
We haven't gone that deep into it. We just mostly talked about the encumbering, but I can ask her again on Wednesday. Because I mean, last time we talked about it, I want to say it was like April.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, do we have other uses for the funds that are sort of in opposition to this? And do we feel like there's no value added to having an answer to the question of whether a shuttle might be a viable option? If there's no competing monetary need, and we do think this is valuable information to have for our report or otherwise, $1,200 is a small.
It's 24.
Is it 24? Is it for 2 students?
For 2 students.
Oh, okay. It is still a relatively small amount to answer, a question that multiple entities in our town have been wondering about. So perhaps it might be helpful to ask those entities who would like to receive that information. Because even if this committee is not going to continue, they will be continuing, right?
Yeah, one of the challenges was not many of the other committees have funding associated with them. For example, the Climate Action Planning Committee.
Right, right. But they would be recipients of the information, right?
Yes, they could
Right.
be. Their
And we
transportation is
don't
a key
have
section of that.
Yeah, and we don't have other competing needs for our budget, right?
Well, clearly this wouldn't be able to be done by the end of June. So that what our current fiscal year funds, whatever's remaining, would not be able to be used towards this. It would have to be the next.
Oh, because we can
fiscal
only
year,
charge work that has been fully completed by the end of June?
by the end of June.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it would have to come out of the next fiscal year, 30,000. Okay, any parting thoughts on this, or last thoughts, Megan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that this may be the most cost-effective approach. However, I would really just emphasize that getting a product of value really requires, it seems to me that it requires getting a roadmap for how to pull this off in addition to the analysis. I think analysis alone may not be a product that's of value. I also would really, really, really encourage making sure that we're working with a student wherever institution they're from, somebody who really is in the field of engineering or planning. Who can get us to a professional product or close to a professional product.
All right, so I think I don't have an answer to that. I think we could find out where this could land after us. So if we said generally that, I mean, it seems like there's mixed support whether to support this or not, even with some questions answered. I guess I'd like to give Deborah some sense of whether, it's worth coming back to us in July, or whether she should begin speaking to some other boards or committees at this point. So let's just go around. Would you want to get some of these questions answered and have Deborah come back, or would you like to have me relay to Deborah that she should start speaking with other boards or committees? Tabor?
I would recommend that we ask her to go to other committees, and with our support to say, this is a great idea. It's unfortunate, but we're not here, we're not going to be here long enough to see it through. So I don't see the true value in starting a project and not knowing when it can be finished.
Dick?
I'll go along with Tabor on that one. I have some other concerns, but I think that's a pretty good one too to deal with right now.
Regina?
I don't really have anything to add to that. I think there could be some value, and I would love to see the product myself and to see it used. But so marketing it and finding a place where it can be used, I think, would be a valuable thing.
Megan?
So I'm fine with having Deborah come back in July. I mean, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I'm offering ideas for how to make it stronger.
Okay. All right, I'll talk with Deborah and I'll see what she would like to do, and we'll see whether she comes back in July or not. All right, now we're going to talk about the tenure report and the spreadsheet. We've been talking about this for a long time too. And we've been talking about folks doing some pieces of this. So Regina has done some work on it, some ideas about how to structure it. I've added some content to it. It's not in any kind of final format. It's more to start getting the conversation started about how to do a report. But before we get into the report, let's go through the spreadsheet since Megan is new to that. And maybe that'll help with a new set of eyes think about the report too. So let me see here. If I can find where I've got it. Give me one sec. Okay, everybody sees it, I think. I hope.
Yes.
Get back to the top. All right, so just get my screen organized here. One more sec here. So what we did was take the goals and organize then the strategies next to them. These are all things that came from the plan itself in terms of the priority and whether it was identified as low-hanging fruit. Then we assigned a committee member to be the follow-up. The lead party came from the plan itself as well as the partners. We added these categories of whether we felt that there's been work had started on this strategy, whether there'd been a halfway mark met, and whether the goal had been met. And the notes on the side are from those of committee members who are following up on these. So I think it's worth going back through this. We went through this before and we identified, like here, that there'd been really Tabor, for example, there was a meeting in September of 22, right? So that obviously happened a while ago. If there's any update to this, Tabor, it would be great if you wanted to either mark it.
I haven't updated any. I haven't had any further meetings. The DCR is not interested in meeting on it, but the other groups, Parks Department, Ponce River Watershed, Mass Audubon, I haven't gotten anything from them either. But.
So this was like, some of it is that's the kind of result, Megan, whether there's really a way for us to get any further follow up, because we do the outreach and there's not much interest expressed. So some of this is that way, that kind of a strategy. Others are far more sort of in control of some entity, right? So, some things where we felt the ones in green are where we feel like the goal's been met. All right, so if we just scroll, there's some looking through, there's some where the goal's been met, but there's a good chunk that haven't been, right? So we need to go back. Then I think we had ones where there's no progress whatsoever, like on the yellow. The ones that have Roxanne's name, those started as a Katie Conlon, then they switched to an Arthur Doyle, and now they're a Megan Haggerty. So maybe those are the ones, Megan, that you might just want to familiarize yourself with.
Yeah.
I think this is hard. This kind of preserving Milton's character is kind of a hard thing, right? Because what does that really mean? We heard from the Justice for All Committee. I'm going to butcher that, Regina, because it's the Equity and Justice for All Committee, I think, that they feel as if, you know, this kind of preserving Milton's character can mean different things to different people. And so when you're talking about physical character versus other kinds of character of the town, so that's something that if we look at this, you know, we can say, well, you know, some things are fairly clear, having a tree planting kind of program, right? But other things are a little bit harder, like stewardship of residential historic properties. So I think this is why if we look at the lead parties, when it's not this is a new, for example, a new task force, right? So where does that task force come from? Who takes the lead on it? Who kind of coordinates it versus something that's Parks and Rec Department, right? Or Conservation Commission or Planning Board. So that's kind of the thing that we ran into, I think, when going through this, and why some things that in our report, if we think about, there's so many, 120 some of these, well, which ones really rise to the top, right? So in the master plan itself, there were top 20 recommendations. And so, you know, that's why we're pulling those out and reporting on those individually. But then otherwise, I think our approach to the report is broader and more general than here's the status of each one of these. This was going to be an appendix so that each one could be referred to by folks, but not something that we would report out individually. And I see, Regina, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I was actually looking for the chat to let you know I'll be right back.
Oh, okay. So did you get a chance to see Megan, how this is organized? I don't know how much more I need to go through.
Yeah, no, I think this is pretty standard. You know, I do a lot of these spreadsheets and tracking in my day job. Question, maybe, you know, this is all sort of covered in the columns I through you know, L, but have all of these projects been like formally scoped so that if there are some leftover projects that would be rolled over into another plan, that that these things could easily be picked up and rolled over, or what's the risk of rework?
Yeah, that's why we felt like we would, our feeling, I think, has been that we would do a recommendation for a targeted update, not a full update.
Okay.
And we took the targeted by the topics that are generally required in the master plan, like economic development, housing, transportation, et cetera. And that's where each of us was assigned one of those broader topics.
Yeah.
To kind of hit the high points of it.
It's a lot of work. This is a lot of work in here.
It is a lot of work.
Like each of the, I mean, this is a whole program. Each of these is a mini project. And you're all acting as PMs on these projects.
So the challenge has been in the very beginning, this was adopted by the planning board and the select board, and the implementation was the committee was formed so that it wouldn't sit on a shelf, but yet we're not empowered in any way other than to track and to make suggestions of what resources should be allocated. We were asked by some, like when Katie Conlon was on, the select board had been asked to get involved in some planning and some studies at Milton Landing. And so she brought that to the committee and we worked on that. We had the library trustees, it's several points in the master plan about assisting the library. They came to us and asked for assistance, and we spent some time on that and town hall area, which you probably saw. So there's some things where we actually took the lead because another party came to us and asked us to, and we had resources. But, you know, like for example, the Parks and Rec department didn't have their own strategic master plan or their own master plan, right? So they're getting funding for that for the CPC now. When we started, the CPC hadn't passed here yet, right? So that source of funding wasn't available for some of these things to kind of move
That's
forward.
also the other sort of thing that popped out at me was just, you know, and that's part of why I was asking if there were separate scopes for these. Just the full dollar figure for each of these. You know, and was there funding assigned to support it?
Yeah, so no funding was assigned at the master plan stage, you know, so anybody else can pipe in here too, to, you know, to answer Megan. You know, there have been times in which it's been recommended that further actions take place, but we've had some cost estimates done, but it's been specific to some of the things that we've worked more directly on than broader things.
I think one of the things also, so that you, Megan, you don't get off on the false impression that we've done all this work. A lot of this is really work that's being done by others. And a lot of this is reporting about that work, whether it's, you know, from an energy conservation standpoint or the health department. This is stuff that we ask the question about whether or not they're working on things. And then they say, yes, we've got this new program and we're applying for funds for it at town meeting. And lo and behold, town meeting votes to approve it. And so this is kind of a way to keep readers of this up to date on what has happened since the master plan went into effect. We didn't actually do the work. Somebody else did it. We're just notching that belt, you know.
Yep.
I mean, whether it's more direct, like a planning board is assigned to something, you know, I have endeavored to take these things to the planning board, right? But like this topic right here, increase market rate and subsidized housing for the elderly. Well, that's kind of a pretty big topic in and of itself, and how the planning board is going to take the lead on that, right? So, you know, there's some of these things that are here, support and encourage the creation of affordable housing. Well, there's lots of things, and that's not just purely a planning board, obviously. So some of these are really big, like in this, particularly in this category, I think, on housing and neighborhoods. Transportation, well, economic development is another one, and transportation and circulation, the open space, and then the capacity to plan. At the time that this plan was being developed, we didn't have the position that Cheyenne fills today. And it wasn't all that long ago that Milton didn't even have a town planner, much less a director of planning and community development. So should we go to the draft of the report in terms of taking a look at that structure? Do you want to look at anything else here, Megan, or anyone else?
I'm good.
Great. All right, now let me go to. All right, since I spent some of my weekend on this, I hope you all took a look at it. All right, here we go. Just again for you to know, Megan, Regina had suggested that we take a report like into a Canva type of format. So this isn't addressing that. This is just really addressing kind of content in a written form. So I mentioned wanting to, this is just an introduction to the master plan itself, the implementation, and then the progress coming in the top 20 recommendations, then each of those categories. This idea of changing conditions is things that we thought the master plan dealt lightly with instead of more issues that this is where some update really needs to happen. And then there would be things within all of these that would be, there was no progress made, and here's what should be looked at coming forward, right? So pulling out of there where progress hadn't been made. In these categories here would be things that weren't adequately addressed. And then our recommendations at the end. Some of that, we could talk about whether some of that's better dealt with in each one of these categories, or is there something that we just summarize at the end? And then in the appendices, the charge, the tracking sheet, and the link to the master plan. So does everyone have any comments about the overall way it's organized, the broad categories? All right.
Hey, Cheryl, I have a quick question, not about the organization, but is there any precedent for how a committee member that rotates off shares the work that they may have done, or is that just not followed up on?
All I did here was ask, you mean someone like Roxanne?
Yeah, like Roxanne.
Yeah, it's just been people picking up, so like
Okay.
there have been a couple of people that weren't select board members that were just community members also who we just kind of reassigned, like Elaine picked up some, for example. As far as we could list names here, I just put past, staff and committee members, but we could list names. I brought in, since we last looked at this, I brought in this requirements from this Mass General Laws in terms of what the master plan is required to contain. So I don't know, folks think that's good or not good to include, but it does set about that this really is on the long-term physical development of the town is what this is addressing, not necessarily everything for the town. And then these particular 9 items are required to be in it. All right, then I just describe that it has the 3 volumes, these general themes, and then the themes developed into the 7 goals and objectives. And
are those goals prescribed by the law too, or is that just from
that just came out of the process?
Okay.
So we could talk about there being some other description here, I suppose, because this goes from, we did this, here's what's required to be in it, here's a bit more about what's in it, right? And then the implementation. So I thought it would be important to have the overview of what's required to be in the plan, what's in the plan on a high level, the implementation, because that's where we get into more of the detail of what the implementation work was, and then the implementation summary.
Yeah, I do think it's important to be up front with the reader in the beginning to say, introduce this as a wide open, free for all. It's no, there's a set of rules that we've got to follow. But quite honestly, half of our description or our accomplishments here are going to incorporate a lot of those goals, just because there's a lot of spillover on everything that we're doing.
So you mean we should include?
I think the introduction is good.
Yeah.
I think it's
Okay.
important to have that.
Okay, good.
I
All right,
agree.
so, all right. And then do you agree with this going from that to this general overview of the plan in these 3 themes and the goals and strategy, or objectives rather, goals and objectives?
I think it's important to emphasize that those weren't things that we just made up as a committee, that they came from the town. When we went out to do the master plan, these are the ones that got the most votes.
Yeah, I think here at the very beginning.
It says it up there, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it shouldn't be said down below as a title, that these are the items that those that participated in the master plan creation, the public, that's what you asked
So
for.
Tabor, I'm already in my head thinking about pull-out boxes
Mhm.
that will be able to sort of do that work visually.
Yeah.
To maybe highlight certain things in a way that would stand out to the reader. And I hear that having some box about process or some box that indicates where these came from, maybe a question and answer box, like where did the requirements come from, or where did the number of volumes come from, or where you know what I'm saying, like.
Yeah, and especially these special pieces down below. Why is Milton's character and physical character so important? Who said that? Well, it was the town that the people that participated in these plans. That's what happened.
All right, so I just put this in here as a placeholder for that comment. Does that sound okay?
Excellent.
I don't want to repeat the plan, because there's a lot of all of that information. I'm hearing myself. Are you guys?
Yeah, Dick he's muted now.
Oh, all right. Sorry. I don't think we want to repeat it, but I think we could have something. And I do like, Regina, if you think about it as off to the side thing, here's how this came to be, or, there's a lot more you could add to this, right? From pulling it out of the plan. There's a whole volume dedicated to it, right? The volume 3. Okay. I think we could at some point.
Dick, can you mute one of your devices?
Maybe hang up the phone.
So, maybe one of the things that we could add a little commentary here, is, preserving character, is a question that's come up, right? Like, what does that entail and is it different for different parts of the community? Let's see if we can add let's see. maybe we say here that these are going to be touched upon later in the discussion or something. I don't know. For more tie-in, but I'll let you all think about that aspect of it a bit. Then the implementation just really described at least the committee's establishment, what's charges, and how we went about doing our work. And then I mentioned, because I'm not sure, Regina, you asked, I think, about where we were going to mention some of the things where we took more of a lead in follow-up, and these were those things. I also had this question about whether they should move later in the report. Because initially this implementation talks about being related to the top 20 recommendations and then the 120 goals and objectives. Any comments so far about this? Including the beginning of this implementation portion? Regina, I'm going to count on you to like maybe think about how to have this be a more interesting text. But I just wanted
I
to
think
get the
there's-
stuff out.
I'm seeing on this a flow chart to the side that show, or a timeline to the side that kind of graphically illustrates this, and then has just a caption below that has some of this information in it that can't be captured visually. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think this part, this part of it, you know, it's the how to get there, you know, is the important part. So we want that to kind of pop, right? So for now, I'm just going to bold that just so we know that we want to do something with that.
And can you put a comment off to the side that says timeline question mark or visual timeline?
Sure.
Thank you.
Where am I here?
You can even add my name to it.
All right. Did I put that in the wrong spot?
I think down further where you said it started in 2014.
All right.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful.
Okay. This was pulled in from something I had done a couple of years ago, like Regina, when you were first joining the committee, and I updated the text of it, but in terms of the format, I didn't do anything with the format. So this was just brought in. So we can decide if this is the best way to convey this, but I did think having the top 20 recommendations was a good thing to include. If we want to organize, you know, what the accomplishments were and go into any further detail. I just feel like this might hit the highlights of it. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts about that.
And just to clarify, the recommendations are those MPIC recommendations, or are you talking about recommendations in the master plan? I just want to,
These are
In the
in the master plan.
okay. And so so here you're listing the top 20 recommendations and the progress that has been made on each of them.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Then we go into the progress by those broad categories. So the historic and cultural resources. Regina, you had done a different document. I just brought it in here.
Awesome. Thank you.
I also thought we need to think about in there, Regina, adding information about the projects that are funded through the CPC now, because there's quite a few of them for parks and recreation and open space. As you
That's
saw,
great. And can we add? So I know you mentioned two things that are changing the changing landscape: the diversity, and what was the second one?
Sustainability and climate change.
Yeah. Can we add one or two additional ones, like the MBTA communities law potentially, or implications of it, and or CPC funding? And that can be a hard no. I think the impact of MBTA communities on planning.
I think we could talk about state housing initiatives in some ways, because that's ADUs and
and new zoning. And then maybe either like fiscal changes, which could include CPC funding or the override, or like some other aspect there. I don't know. Funding considerations, funding updates, financial, whatever it is. I don't know. Financial considerations. I don't know.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elaine.
Oh, hello, Elaine. How you doing?
Too dark to play baseball, huh?
It was a tie.
Oh.
Oh, that's when you kind of even start hoping that anybody wins, right?
Okay.
This is probably like, I think financial considerations captures this, but I'm sure when you all started this effort, nobody had contemplated COVID-19, and maybe, I don't know if there are long-term impacts from that have changed town, but yeah, that are,
I think it's
like,
worth its own little,
yeah,
its own little thing, because you're right.
there was a disruption during this effort.
It was an educational moment.
Yep.
I'll take this one. Gosh, I think. Who would like to take this one?
I'll do it.
All right. Thank you, Taper. And anybody on this one?
Do you want me to take COVID since I suggested
you brought it up.
and I haven't taken anything yet? Also, should I take the facilities and services?
Yeah. I left those there just so we could see. Yeah.
You know, Megan, I think that will engender you to the peeps big time. Just coming around and checking in and
Yeah.
asking all the good questions. You know, I remember when Erin Bradley did that, she said, people said no one from the select board had ever come to do that, to talk to
Wow.
different department heads and stuff. So
Right, I'm going to go back down. Elaine, I don't know when you joined us since I had the screen share on. We went over the spreadsheet briefly.
I was not here for that.
Okay, so you came in when we started this. Okay. We did the spreadsheet just to kind of review it with Megan, but we did think we should all take a look at it and see if there's places where we think that something might need to be updated or out of date, or we had a question about, since it's been a couple of years. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So back to, so Regina had started with this section where she identified what's, so I think Regina, this came out of that discussion we had when Winston came to our meeting, right?
Absolutely.
So Megan,
Yeah.
what we did, I think it was in that text that I did, but after we had gone through some years of doing that email and outreach, et cetera, we invited folks into our meetings. So from parks commissioners to historic commission members to Sustainable Milton and so on and so forth. So we augmented some of our information with that. So I think here, Regina, maybe what you can do is add something about a high level, tying it back into some of those things in the plan.
Yep.
And so does that?
Do you want them tied in a way that someone could look for the numbers in the plan, or what?
What do you think? I didn't think so. I didn't think we needed to do that. Do you?
Okay. I don't know.
What do others think? Because like, let's say, for example, like Regina, you have here, these are the ones that are in the spreadsheet, right? And then if we
Yeah.
take the one that I took a stab at, which is the economic development, I just hit some of the summary that came out of the master plan, some of the recommendations, high level, and then hit the achievements and challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and then some recommendations. So some of what's contained in here includes some of what we learned from Joe Parlavecchio and from JD
Mhm.
Wild,
Mm-hmm.
right? In some of the achievements, challenges, and recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So these two sections are a little bit different, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's worth looking at to see,
How we can make them kind of fit a template so that everybody can operate
Exactly,
under
yeah,
the same
exactly.
template. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I don't know, Cheryl. I don't know if this is work that the whole group has to do, or if maybe you and I can get together and solidify that.
So if I know what we had spoken about before was how hard it is to kind of just jump in, and that we thought we could develop a template. So if others have had a chance to look at these slightly different ways of putting this together, you can give us your feedback, but I'm happy to do that with just you and I, Regina. But then we would need to have that, just thinking we have 3 meetings left, right? We don't have a lot of time to sort of put a bow around all of it. So we would need folks at least to start thinking about their content, even if it's not in one of these formats, right?
Right. Or they could pick one, and then as we're developing the full one, it'll have something from each of them, maybe.
I was thinking, Regina, can't you just run this through an AI tool at some point and it just summarizes it all for us?
You should be able to. The trick would be to make sure that the person in charge of each part fully reviews their
Yeah.
part, right? Because you really do have to, go through it with a fine tooth comb. And
Hey, Dick, we can see your credit cards. I just want to
I'm
make sure.
jotting them down, Dick.
Glad you can see them. Would you like to pay a few of them?
no,
No, we're running up the bill further.
There you go.
So I was thinking maybe that AI tool could help put it all in the same kind of
format. Yeah, maybe.
format, language prose kind of thing, like if
Yeah.
we get the kind of the content down.
Mhm.
So I do think that the way you had done it suggested, Regina, in terms of, I just kind of think of this as a little bit of background, right? Then what's in the plan, recommendations, achievements, challenges, and recommendations. Those are that I think makes sense. Whether they get separated out, like you, I think, had them separated out into these categories. I wasn't sure if you wanted to have achievements for every one of the big buckets and then challenges for every one of the big
I
buckets.
think we can
cetera.
visually, like, we could put a little dot next to it that's a particular color for each one of the 7 big buckets. Like, there's lots of visual ways to kind of code these things, that you wouldn't have to explicitly talk about the category, like have the category delineated in text form. Or we could have them in colored boxes. Like, there's lots of different options.
But how much time would you need to put all this box kind of stuff together?
Well, once it's done, that is definitely something that AI can help with, like in Canva. But I think I can take a stab at that using these first 2, and go from there.
So we're going to give Megan some time to get caught up here, but if we can get the others to get some kind of draft together for our next meeting. So like Regina and I took a stab at 2. So that leaves Tabor, let's see, where are we
And
at?
remember, I apologize for how short mine was, but that became sort of, Cheryl indicated that was okay and that was important to not make it too long and drawn out. That
Yeah.
I just would like for you to have a little bit more right here about
Yep.
specifics from the plan.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else you want to draw out of the spreadsheet.
When is the next meeting, Cheryl?
Oh, yeah, we discussed that, Elaine. Does July 14th, August 4th, and September 10th. I'm assuming there's going to be an October town meeting. We have to deliver a report to town meeting, as well as the select board and the planning board.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tabor, I think if you could take a stab at your historic and cultural resources, I think even if we came and added those things that we just added on the considerations, if we get the bulk of it, we can come back and address those.
Can we send these
categories
in ahead of time or I guess my question is, can we communicate with each other as a committee without being at a public meeting by sending this around, or is it only to be sent?
It's a shared document right now. And
I'm just looking at the comments that are going to start coming on, and I'd love to be able to see the comments quickly, but I don't know how much the public has to say about that.
My understanding is a draft document is not shared with the public, but the question is whether
is the discussion that goes into it.
Yeah.
Discussion, yeah.
That's the question, is the comments become part of the discussion. That's all it is.
So like right now, we're doing this in public format, right? But it's the question of, or in a public meeting, the question of doing anything in between.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we have to get some clarification from town council on that.
Hmm.
And we all send our stuff to Regina. Maybe that's not considered uh, you know, outside of the public meeting.
Well, if it's
Uh,
Regina and I, that's not a quorum, so we can do it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so why don't we do that? Instead of having anybody put anything directly into the shared document, just send to Regina, me, and Cheyenne. Then we'll review it at the next meeting.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
So
Okay,
just to confirm, we're not adding anything directly into the document.
right.
But isn't that how the spreadsheet worked in the past?
It's true.
Shh,
It
don't
is
tell
how the
anybody.
spreadsheet-
Yeah,
Here.
but there weren't, was there comments going on back and forth in that?
Each person
Well, that would be the
individually
only
their comments.
But not like a conversation going back and forth. Is
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's where the gray area comes in.
All right, why don't we find out?
Like, I think the comments that we've made so far, like adding a visual timeline, maybe, I don't think that's a huge red flag, but if we went back and forth, that might be problematic, but yeah, let's figure it out.
So I think I'll reach out to town council and I'll send an email out just so we can be clear. But right now we're in public meeting, so all of this is fine. Megan, you see, I just put your name here. Then Regina, I took this, you saw that I took this from meeting minutes and I thought you could decide what you might want to add here. Is that good? And
Yep, that's
I did the same to start the climate change and sustainability, pulled that from our meeting minutes from the meetings we had. I do want to add a few things to this as well. So this is the question of format, Regina, that I had about whether we were going to hit all of these things during each bucket or we were going to organize it a little bit differently. I see her eyeballs turn the other way, so we'll wait a minute. So, see, this is what I was talking about, Regina, where you had pulled these out separately. I kind of thought if somebody's interested in housing in neighborhoods or something, they could just get all of it in one place instead of having to go to 4 or 5 different places. Like if they, do you know what I mean?
If
what I mean
each
about-
one of us has our own part where we say where we are, et cetera, and then each.
Exactly. That's kind of the way I addressed it here, where
Right.
it's all in one place for this, rather than being split out for each of those topics.
I think that's a little bit easier to digest as well.
Yeah, okay. So we'll leave it that way. Okay, Regina, you good with that?
I am.
Okay, everybody's good with that? And then this was just I started to add some of the names of the folks who came in and met with us. It's not 100% complete. All right, so that, I think the part where we'll need the most discussion is our recommendations, right? So maybe I will take a stab at that for the next meeting. And so we at least have a start of that.
and are you, Cheryl, are you planning to do the organizing or the content?
Oh, I was planning to think of the content.
Okay.
I'm letting you do the I mean, I guess the overall organization in terms of information, I'm open to, I did it this way, but if you all have other ideas of how this should go, it just seems sort of logical to me to go in this way. Yeah. But as far as taking this.
Oh no, I meant the recommendations.
Yeah, so
specifically.
this committee recommendation part, I was just going to start based on, all of our discussions and meetings, start putting, start drafting it. But
And doing
some of
it
it's going to
according
come
to
out.
the 7 buckets.
I think in the buckets, we're already going to have recommendations, right? So this
Okay.
might be a higher level.
Got it. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Higher level recommendation, like if we recommend that the plan be updated, do we have a recommendation of how that should be updated, what resources are necessary, what timelines necessary, kind of stuff along that line.
So in the buckets, we have sort of implementation recommendations, and then outside of that, we have committee recommendations that are about further master planning.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that I was
Okay.
I was getting what you were laying down.
So for example, this was because some of this work was never done, it felt like it was important to restate some of it, right? Because of the economic development. Maybe this is where we talk about the further lack of commercial development, or we talk about the structural deficit issues with, but it hadn't really been in the plan that way. The plan had really, it's identified here, right? Tax valuation by commercial districts is tiny.
That's insane.
But we could offer commentary too that, that kind of any change in that is a pretty significant thing in terms of public participation, agreement, et cetera, right?
I did have one comment on that piece in particular, that the total tax valuation is generated. It would be the total taxes are generated, or the valuation is, but I think it implies it's 3.8% of the valuation, but I'm not so sure what are the taxes that are on it. And it sort of mixes the two. The valuation and the taxes are different because commercial and residential are taxed at different rates. So I thought it should be, I left the note in there somewhere.
So it should be revenue?
I still
it should
think
be
it
tax
comes
revenue.
in. I still think it comes in at like 3 to 5% of revenue. I should remember this because we had a finance committee meeting on Friday, but it's a small. We can get that figure. It's a small.
Right. I just think we should be specific. As are we telling you that it's valuation, or are we telling you that it's taxes?
Revenue.
Revenue, and then that's.
Gonna add a comment, but where'd it go?
I had a comment in there somewhere, but I don't know where it went. Probably got scrolled down.
All right, we'll find it. So I think one thing also that could be valuable is if everybody could get their section to some level, except for Megan. Megan being new to it, I think a fresh eye on the whole thing, like as they're reading it through, like you're not familiar. So as someone does it flow? Does it make sense? Does you follow what the plan is, what the committee did, what the recommendations are, et cetera, because it's a little harder to get that clean set of eyes when you've been in it for 10 years. Make sense? All right. Any other comments, questions?
I'm kind of excited to put all this together and put it to bed.
And Cheyenne, if you don't mind starting to take a look too, being newer to it than I think most of us. So, does it make sense? Or would you have questions if you were reading it? this is inconsistent with that, I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
All right. Well then, that is it for tonight. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Is there all right. All those in favor, Tabor,
aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Regina,
Bye.
Dick,
Yes.
Elaine,
Hi.
and myself, yes. Thanks, everyone.
Have
Good
a
night.
great night.